Hi, this is Starkie Sowers. Welcome again to another Plus program training series. Today's topic is water, and this is part two. All right, so we talked a little bit about water in the first session. We gave you all sorts of neat little insights. Number one, three-quarters of the world is literally covered in water, as well as three-quarters of the body is additionally water. And so a couple different things that were unique is we talked about the lungs, how like 90% of the lungs are water volumes, so to speak, as well as the skin 80%, as well as the muscles 75. So we know that water is everywhere. A couple significant things on water is this. Where does it function in the body? So when we look at the body, think of nutrients being delivered to the cell. First of all, blood has to carry those nutrients to the cells. Once those nutrients get to the cells, they get metabolized. So proteins, fats, carbohydrates, vitamins, minerals get used up in the cells. And so then there's waste particles. So in order to be carried away, that's a water medium as well. So water in, water out. Additionally, certain types of minerals have to be balanced in water. And so finally, one of the things that we look at when it comes to cell metabolism, if there's not water, there is no cell metabolism. A couple other interesting features are this as well. The joints are hydrated with water. So think about this. Next time you get in underneath a squat bar and pick up some weight, one thing that happens on the spine and a lot of the different areas is those are synovial fluid membranes, and there's water that hydrates that. And they kind of lock in place and they hold that water and they actually give almost like a secondary cushion effect by having adequate amounts of water, especially during, before, and after working out. All right, so one of the other things that becomes critical too is thermoregulation or heat regulation. So if your body has a tendency to be hot from working out outside, if you don't have adequate amounts of water, you're not going to cool off properly. Obviously, sweating becomes a critical component in this situation. So what you might be thinking is, well, how much water is enough? How much water do I need to drink on a daily basis? So a couple of significant things. Number one, there's an absolute minimum of 500 milliliters. Well, what's 500 milliliters? It's roughly about 2 cups. So you might be thinking, well, I do a little bit better than that. So let's look at a couple other different statistics. If you're a 100-pound individual, roughly about 4 to 5 glasses a day. If you're a 160-pound individual, it's going to be roughly about 6+ glasses a day. If you're 200, you're going to start climbing into those 10 to 12 glasses. So a lot of times you'll hear situations where people will say, well, 6 to 12 glasses a day or 8 to 10 glasses a day. And so there's a lot of little medium in there, but it's going to be a lot of it based on body weight being one of the number one statistical things that you need to remember. All right. So in addition to that, one of the things that we need to do is not only look at the water requirements for the body, but also know that those particular nutrients are being delivered with that water. All right. So what I want to do now is I want to do this. I want to start looking at a couple different thoughts on water. First of all, you might be thinking, well, what about dehydration, or what if, am I getting enough water? So let's kind of maybe have a checklist and look at that. Number one on the list is this. If you're thirsty, if you also lack appetite, and specifically those two together kind of have a tendency to correlate, that might mean that you're a little bit on the dehydrated side. So you're thirsty, you're a little bit lacking appetite, you're not hungry, and also fatigue being number one. Well, number two on the list, when you start getting a dry mouth and you start losing muscle coordination, especially if you're an athlete, that means that you're starting to go a little bit further in, deeper into dehydration. So the third step would be something like mental acuity or mental alertness. You're starting to lose that. So think about it as an athlete. As you're working out, you're in a situation, you're starting to work out more and more and more, and the next thing you know, you're more fatigued, and all of a sudden, finally, you end up in a situation where there's muscle, what we call spasticity, or just like excitement, or just, where you're just edgy, so to speak. You might be in a full situation of going into dehydration. So it's kind of some neat steps to look at. So one of the thoughts on that is maybe just look at those things and realize I'm going to need to have a certain amount of water to prevent this from happening. So when we look at exercise and we think about exercise situations, one of the things that we know is that drinking water during, before, and after helps to rehydrate back. So real couple simple thoughts here. Number one, drinking a little bit of water before, especially like if you're an hour before an event, maybe 1 or 2 glasses before, and then during the event, you want to drink a little bit of water throughout the event as you're going along, and then afterwards will help to replenish. A couple other significant factors here too. The hotter it is, the more you're probably going to need. The longer the endurance that the athlete might need, so to speak, instead of an hour workout, you might need upwards to maybe double what somebody else needs as you're going into a 3 or 4 hour range. So the more or the longer the workout, the needs are going to go up. The other thing is the physical demand. Certain types of exercises oftentimes require more or more physical demand, so to speak, and so that might require a little bit more water. So kind of have those thoughts in mind. So a lot of times people ask this, well, what about a sports drink? What about using the sports drink that would be maybe more beneficial or helpful? Well, there's a couple unique things about sports drinks when we look at it. Number one, they have a tendency to typically be sweet, and they also have a tendency to have the sweet factor, which would be glucose, and typically they're chilled. So one thing to remember about water is this. If you're going to drink water before, during, or after an athletic event, chilled water definitely makes it easier to tolerate and also better to get in the system. One of the things that we remember too is where are you going to get your water? Not only from water itself, but you also might consume it from tea or coffee or something of that nature. One thing to remember is if you're doing tea or coffee, you kind of have a tendency to dehydrate. What's nice about a sports beverage or a sports drink, it's going to do just the opposite. It's going to hydrate. Typically added some glucose as well as some minerals such as electrolytes. So what are electrolytes? Sodium and potassium regulate how much water gets in and how much water gets out of cells, as well as how much water is hydrated into the bloodstream. Additionally, calcium and magnesium as electrolytes help to regulate what we call muscle spasms and also muscle contractions and relaxation. So very critical. Another great factor about sports beverages is they also have what we call osmolality. Say that 10 times. And so what happens is a little bit of glucose, a little bit of sodium delivers into the system very nice and very rapidly. All right. And so finally, one of the great things with sports drinks too is kids love them, very tolerable, kind of an exciting thing to use. So you might be thinking, well, I wanted a little bit more of a natural approach. A couple different things that you can do. Number one, coconut water is like loaded with potassium. It's a great electrolyte. A lot of times people get a little stomach upset, so you might want to dilute it or be in a position where you just sip a little bit and then sip water along with it. The other thing is if you're using a carbohydrate beverage, roughly about 14 grams for every 8 ounces is about the max that you want. You go too much more than that, and it kind of lays heavy in the stomach, so you don't want to do too much more than that. So finally, one of my little favorite tips I like to do when I'm working around the house is I'll take water, take about a half of a lemon, squeeze it into it, a pinch of salt. It's kind of like the perfect electrolyte, especially for you guys that maybe just are working outside, really not doing any sports, but maybe just want to get a little bit of an electrolyte into the system to prevent those symptoms of dehydration. So that kind of wraps up this session, gives you a little bit of information on a lot of different areas about water. Hopefully this has been helpful for you. We appreciate you watching the Plus Program Training Series. My name is Starkie Sowers, and thank you again for watching.